Welcome everybody to another episode of Transcend with Them. And here I am with my good friend Dulce Orozco. Welcome, Dulce.
Thank you, Monica. I'm excited to be here, so thank you.
I'm excited to have you. And today we're going to learn Dulce's immigrant story. She is a therapist for Latino entrepreneurs. She's a mom. She's a wife. She's a daughter, a sister. And there is many things that will unfold on telling her story that you will be very surprised about. But more than that, I think you will be inspired. So, Dulce, tell us your story.
My story. So I was born and raised in Venezuela. The plan was that after I graduated from high school, I was going to come learn English and go back home. But I decided to apply for a scholarship that I ended up getting. So that's how I stayed. Things in Venezuela were not as bad as they are right now. And that has been a huge part of my immigration story because there's a part of me that has always, that has had this need to clarify. I did not come here, because things in Venezuela were not hard. Or almost, Monica, part of me that needs to really make it clear for others that perhaps I had it easier than other people immigrating, which is interesting, right? Because every immigration story is different, and that doesn't mean that I did not have challenges in mine, but it's something that I learned to see years later, looking back and reflecting on it, and with a lot of compassion, looking at it with compassion, which I couldn't do at the beginning.
Yeah. So, you got the scholarship, you came here, leaving your family behind. How was that journey of, I guess, that transition, right? That journey of deciding that you were going to stay here, leaving your family behind, knowing that you probably wouldn't be able to go back at some point, or if you decided to stay here, were your family going to be able to visit, right? How often could you see them? Because we as Latinos, families, everything, we're used to see them every day, right? So that separation, that anxiety, right? Like, how did you deal with all of that? I mean, Dulce is a therapist, so, now she has the tools to help us deal with that.
Sometimes.
But you yourself at that moment in time, you were not you were not a therapist.
Yeah.
So, how did you deal with all of that, and how did it influence your journey here?
Well, that was one of the reasons why I really wanted to come, was so I could study and I could become a therapist at some point. So interestingly enough, my parents were like, we want you to stay in our hometown. And psychology was not something I could study in my hometown. So I knew that by default, if I came here, that was going to be what I was going to study. And Monica, I did not, I was 17 at the time, extremely adventurous, very courageous, naive, adding a little dumb in between that, that mix.
Hi, Dulce. I think we are a little bit dumb when we are on our teens, right?
Well,
even on our 30s and 40s.
Oh,
we still experience
absolutely. Yes, but I was not afraid, And actually, I've been very intentionally wanting to embrace and reconnect with that part of myself that was adventurous, that was courageous, that said, this is what I want to do, because I lost that along the way. So I think that I was not afraid. I knew that I did not want to stay in Venezuela. I knew that I wanted to try new things. I come from a relatively small town, so when I came here and I heard people speaking all these languages, I've heard of so many different religions and so people that look so different than myself. It was almost like no going back. That's how it felt like. And, as I told you, I've been in this journey to reconnect with that part of myself that was very confident without having a plan. That was never part of the process.
That's what like having kids and, getting married does to you sometimes.
Right? Yes. And I would add that part of that, for me, was idealizing United States. So I came from Venezuela, a country that many people refer to as a third world country, right? At the time, the Colombian guerrillas were super active. I've experienced and I saw a lot of very close people to me being kidnapped. So that part, like that freedom or that fear, always living in fear, right? Even though my parents were middle class, but living with that threat, esa amenaza constante, right? That was extremely scary. And I idealized United States. In my eyes, it was almost like, oh my goodness, there's no corruption here. Here, everything is perfect. Everything works perfectly fine. And with that, following what other people were doing, right? Which I think that many of us can do. And realizing that doesn't work for me. And realizing, well, with all the privilege that I do have and I recognize, because I want to make that clear, I believe that I was privileged, right? But still, I was able to see that here, it's not a perfect place. And that allowed me, it's almost like I gave myself permission to say, what if I try this differently? But it took me a while.
Yeah. So becoming to that realization, you still didn't give up on your dream of becoming a therapist.
Yeah.
You still didn't give up on wanting to succeed, which is remarkable, even though there was a little bit of disappointment there. So tell me about how did you make it work, right? After idolizing US, disappointment, and now I'm going to do it differently.
Yeah.
So what happened?
Yeah. And with disappointment, I would say probably more than disappointment was this realization that there's no place is perfect, right? So what can I make? How can I make the best of this? Knowing that going back home was not an option for me, because things were getting progressively worse, and having the added pressure of wanting to do better things. And coming here, I had my daughter, so it was like, what can I give them? So that internal pressure that sometimes doesn't help. If anything, it does the opposite. But I think it transpired mostly in my career. So as a therapist, it's very common for people to start out in community mental health, which is very underpaid. You work many hours, sometimes even putting yourself at risk, because there's no, when it comes to safety, the procedures, unfortunately, are not the best. But that's kind of like the path that people follow. When I have my oldest daughter, we knew as a family that it was important for us to... We made the decision that I was going to start my private practice so I could take care of her. But interestingly enough, this was pre-pandemic. The thought or the way people saw therapy was, well, I go to in-person therapy when I'm done with work. So I work evenings, which wasn't ideal. And I almost followed the same thing that I was doing in the community mental health, part of it on my own, like I was a generalist. Sometimes I was dumb enough to put myself in danger, maybe meeting somebody for the first time. Yes, I tried to ask questions, but I was alone in a building at 8 p.m. And I was meeting this person for the first time, right? So I realized this is not what I want, but it was very scary to try something different. It was very scary to take that leap. And I couldn't do it on my own. So during the pandemic, I joined this program for therapists that want to make that change, that want to stop taking insurance, which was another huge part of it, right? Because
That's a big change. Yeah.
It is a big change. And also I needed to really realign and connect with my own values. So I felt that I needed to be clear as of the why, because there was a part of me that felt like a traitor, right? Like to the people I wanted to work with. Are they going to be able to see me? And then I got so mad at myself because I was like, that means that I don't believe Latino people can invest in therapy. So in a way, I was putting down my own people. Yeah. But it was all this mixture of many, many different emotions, Monica, and realizing that just by doing that, I was discriminating people like me and Latinos like myself. And at the same time, wanting to do something to end that stigma and wanting to do something different for my family, better for my family. I feel that for many people that work in this career, not just social work, but many different people, you know, like mental health, social work, there's this idea that you do what you do because you love it, which is true, but almost that you don't need the money, you know, because you love it so much that it's okay to be extremely underpaid.
Yeah.
And I did not want that anymore.
So explain to me, how did you became to define you want to help the Latino community? You want to be of service. But, you know, at this moment in time, you had to prioritize family, income, and your desire, right? Because we all need that flame to keep us going, right? And your wants. So how did you come to the conclusion that, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is the segment of Latinos that I'm going to focus on. And that fear that you felt, how has it been vanishing with time by understanding that you actually made the right decision?
Yeah, it's been a process.
Yeah.
I would say the first thing was getting help and not doing it by myself because I was stuck.
Yeah.
I needed someone to help me. And I realized that I feel lucky enough because I feel that what I like to do the most is what I do best, which is working with Latinas and women from immigrant families on one-on-one. And that transpired, Monica, it's very interesting because organically, I do think that when you start doing what you love, you attract more of it.
Of course.
So very organically through LinkedIn, in the middle of the pandemic, I got companies and business telling me, so do you work with Latinx employees? And I started working with that group, Latinx employees and Latinx students as well. And that lit up a whole fire within me. And the feedback I kept getting is, Dulce, not many people do this, and it's so needed. And a part of me couldn't believe that not many people were doing this because there's so many of us here, and we clearly need the help and services and so on, right?
Yeah.
So the hardest, well, let me take that back. The most challenging part for me has been to realize the value of my work.
Which is unvaluable. Because, you know, it is interesting. You yourself, as a therapist, were under the assumption that people will not invest, our own people will not invest on their own medical health in order to achieve success.
Yes.
And you had to go through a journey of courage and making a decision in order to realize that it's a service that it's needed more than you thought. And, you know, you probably don't have enough hours on the day to like cater to everybody. You probably have had to say no one time or two. So tell me about that realization, and how have you become kind of like a trailblazer, revolutionary within your own, counterparts, right? Because I assume, and I am assuming right now, but I assume that while people watch what you were doing by taking that step that they didn't think it was possible, now others are following your steps.
It's not easy for me to hear that. I'm like trying to get more comfortable hearing it. But that's exactly why it's so important for me to do it, because when I started this process in 2020, in the middle of a pandemic. I was like, I need to do something different. I know that we were all maybe closer to death that we wanted to in many different levels. We lost people that we loved, and I came to the realization that I wasn't doing so many things out of fear, even though I knew what I wanted to do, but it was fear that was stopping me. And I did not have, Monica, at a time, a Latina immigrant therapist that I could look up to and that I could say, what else can I do other than one-on-one therapy, right? What else?
Or just the regular thing that everybody has done for decades.
Yeah, and maybe there are some there. And the beautiful thing about this process is that right now, I know some.
Yeah.
Because I put myself out there. That's how we met.
Yes. That's exactly how we met, on a Zoom meeting.
Yeah.
My goodness, it was the random thing. It was like, oh, she's Latina. In this entire group, we're the only two Latinas.
We were
here.
the only ones. And I was like, I see you. We need to connect. And I thank God because of that, you know? And like you, I've met so many beautiful, amazing, inspirational Latinas that have opened doors for me. And that's why it's so important for me to do it. One thing, though, Monica, that I, you know that saying, you teach what you need to learn?
Never heard it.
You've never heard it?
No.
Did I make that up? No, it's not mine.
But that's okay. I don't know everything. So this is, I learn something new every day.
Well, there's this saying, right? Basically, the idea is that those things that come to you in different ways, it's not a coincidence that it's a part of you, right? And I feel that for me, one of those things is self-compassion, which is one of the pillars of my work, because it's so hard for me to be compassionate towards myself. Not too long ago, so about 3 weeks ago, maybe less. Anyways, I was diagnosed with trapezoid muscle spasm, which resulted in a pinched nerve on my left arm, right? I've had this throughout my life. It's not the first time. I was referred to physical therapy. And when I went to urgent care, I told it was a Black female doctor, amazing. And I was like, the worst part of this is that I think this was stress-induced. And I'm a freaking therapist.
Yeah.
I was so mad at myself. And she was so nice. And she told me, so what? That doesn't mean that you can't get stressed? I was like, well, I can, but I wish I would handle it differently, right? And it's that. It's those instances where it's like, well, a part of me might know in theory, I might know it. But when it comes time to practice it, that's a whole different thing, right? I need my own therapy. That's why for me, it's so important to start. I try to start every space, but definitely the one-on-one sessions by doing a brief breathing exercise or visualization, or like really honoring the mind-body-spirit connection, and honoring that, it's a work in progress.
And that's why there is a rule, like therapists cannot self-medicate or give themselves therapy, right?
Yeah.
We all need someone, Dulce. It's okay. It's okay,
It's
Dulce.
okay. Yeah.
And I think that's the hardest part for a lot of us is, understanding that we're also human.
Oh, yeah.
We want to be everything for everybody, but we cannot be that for ourselves. And I think that's what we all struggled the most. Therapist or no therapist, business owner, mom, whatever it is that you are. I think that topic of self-compassion is something that we are not used to.
We don't know how to do it.
Especially the Latino community.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know what it's so funny. There is a lot, for those that follow social media, right? Instagram, Facebook, there is a lot of memes that said, you know you're a Latina mom when, and then there is this guy dressed like a lady and he's carrying like 10 supermarket bags in one hand and like 5 in another, and the kid comes behind and say, Mom, let me help you. And it's like, no, I got this, right? So I feel like our lives are like that, where we are like that character, where we, from the very early age, are taught that we need to be there and we need to be everything for everybody else.
Yes.
We have to handle it, right? Whatever that means.
Yes.
You have to handle
no matter
it.
the price.
No matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And you yourself and I, only when you have done. If you have done.
And I would add, Monica, because of that,
Yeah.
tell me what you think about this, but I've noticed that there's almost like this unspoken pride with it, right? Like with a lot of people I work with, it's like, well, I have 2 jobs, and then I come home and I cook dinner, and it's like, what if you eat cereal for dinner once, like, right? Like, I mean, like, but there's this unspoken, what about takeout if you can meet, like, there's this unspoken pride that comes along with it. And that reminds me of what we were talking about, this internal pressure. It can be external too.
Yeah.
And I think that's why some of us like have it so ingrained in our system. But it comes to a point where we have the choice whether or not you want that pressure to dictate your life.
Right.
Or it's not easy, but you can find the assistance and the help and strategies to have a new relationship with that pressure, right? For me, I've learned to have a new relationship with guilt. For me, one of those things that it's pretty often with me, it's guilt.
Yeah. I share that sentiment.
And I've learned, a part of me, I spent so many years trying to avoid it, trying to ignore it.
Yeah.
And that did not work because I realized that it wasn't going anywhere. If anything, it intensified. So it's like, okay, I know you're going to be here. So how can we get along differently? Coexist. Yes.
Yeah. I'll tell you, sometimes, we work really hard. In the past year and a half, I've barely had time for my family a lot, right? But I still sometimes get home and with all the guilt I feel about not being able to be around them as much, I still tell them, estoy de brazos caídos hoy. No voy a cocinar. No me importa si comieron o no. Si hay ropa lavada o no. Si la casa está limpia o no. It doesn't really matter. Estoy de brazos caídos. I'm not going to do anything. And I have to practice that self-compassion because, as much as you work outside the home, you cannot do both always at 100%. And I think you need to sometimes take a step back and be okay.
Yeah.
With that, be okay with living with that guilt. Well, yesterday I slept all day. I am sorry, guys, that I did not perform at my 100%. Yes, I feel guilty. I might have missed that baseball game or whatever. But at the end of the day, I also practice self-compassion, and I needed to take care of myself so I could wake up today.
Yeah.
Right? So I think it's always looking at things from different perspective, and it's always a give and take. You know, you're always sacrificing something to do something else. And yes, you know, it takes practice, it takes work. Sometimes you have to make certain sacrifices in order to obtain something else. And sometimes you really need to be hard with yourself and put a stop into things, right? So I believe that as far as you know how to create that balance for yourself, it is okay. It is okay. And I think we all experience a little bit of everything. Anxiety, guilt, you know, dependency sometimes of certain things, you know, and they are not always healthy. But sometimes you just have to go through them to understand that, okay, this is not what I want. I gotta work through it so it doesn't happen again or often, or I don't go back into that behavior. But now you have experienced it. Now you know what it is, and then, you know, you work through it.
Yeah.
So I feel sometimes like, even though, like, I wouldn't want my daughter to ever go to depression, but who am I to say that she never will?
Yeah.
And maybe she goes through it and she learns more about herself, right? Like, there's always two sides of the coins, I feel, and like that's where counting with professionals like yourself is so important, to have people like you behind us, right? That you can say, hey, it's okay. We're going to work through this, right? And it happens to all of us.
And those patterns, because some of those are patterns, right, that you were describing. And it's so interesting that sometimes when we're in the middle of the thing, we cannot see what those patterns are.
Correct.
It's so hard for us unless we have some external help. And part of those patterns might be to say, oh, no. I've done this by myself all these, you know, times. I don't need anyone, right?
Yeah.
Many of the people I work with, Monica, have either, I feel that they've done so much self-help work by themselves, right? Whether it's reading books, whether it's through belonging to different communities, talking to someone, but they got to the point where they very intentionally want therapy for the first time. And it's amazing to see all the work they've done because of those experiences that you've said. Or the other case, which is very interesting, is they've had therapy before, but not with a Latino or a Latinx therapist or a therapist of color. And therapy was not what they were looking for. It did not give them that, you know, whatever it is that they were looking for. So it's not a coincidence that they're looking for me. They're looking for me exactly because of what I do and how I do it. But yeah, it's being able to see those patterns and hopefully do something to pivot them, right?
Yeah. You bring a very important point, which is working with someone that can understand who you are, where you come from. You know, you focus on Latinos, Latina entrepreneurs. And I've been one person that had therapy before. And I can tell you that there definitely makes a difference when you can, let's say, do therapy in English, but then you can put some Spanish words out there because they don't have any translation, and work with someone that can understand you, right? You know, like I have some cursing words in Spanish that are not the same as Venezuelan cursing words, like, you know, Boricua cursing words. So, or you know, expressions or things, right? So, how important and how different can be for someone to work with a therapist that can understand your culture. Because I'll tell you, it's not the same.
Yeah.
And how have you seen that you've been able to help these people more in shorter period of time that probably all the therapy they've had in the past 10 years?
Yeah, well, I do work with Latinas is my specialty and one-on-one therapy. But interestingly enough, I also work with women from immigrant families because what I've noticed is that absolutely, yes, when you work with the right Latina therapist or Latino therapist, which I cannot emphasize enough the importance of, yes, for so many people, the fact that your therapist is Latinx might be great, but like most importantly, it has to be the right person for you.
Right.
You know, because there's so many differences within the Latinx community,
and
you know.
personalities.
Absolutely, yes. But unfortunately, there are not enough therapists of colors or therapists from immigrant families or therapists that can understand the experience of being an immigrant. So what happens to me, Monica, is that women from other underrepresented groups might gravitate towards me, and even though they might not be Latinas, they might be from Italian families, right? And you know, it's not the same, but we understand each other. So I wanted to put that out there. But what I've noticed is that there's a lot less explaining or justifying, you know. I myself, even working with therapists that were not Latinx, found myself doing a lot of explanation, almost like justifying why it was so important that I stood up in the middle of a family dinner. We shouldn't do that, right? So it was like, you know, the therapist was like, well, you were setting some boundaries. And I was like, no, you don't understand. That was like more than set, or, you know, whatever it was. But so a lot less of that. Because what happens is
Apologizing. I cannot tell you how many times a day I have my business partner telling me, do not apologize.
Yeah.
It's like a curse.
Automatico.
It's a curse.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is a curse.
And it's amazing that you have somebody that tells you, you did it, you know, like, don't do it again.
We're working on it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. That's great. And again, those all patterns, right? But many people have shared with me that on a way they felt seen, and they felt that the therapist was trying to understand where they were coming from, but that took away a lot of time from the therapy itself.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. Another thing that people have shared with me is how sometimes things are misunderstood, right? For example, codependency. You know, when it's like, is it codependency, or are we talking about like family dynamics within the Latino culture that are seen as quote unquote normal? And yes, I can see how that can turn into codependency, but let's really try to talk about it from that cultural perspective. So I do think that, again, the most important thing is the right therapist.
Yeah. No, and I can see, you know, the immigrant journey is similar for a lot of people, right? Even though the stories are not the same, every family goes through different ups and downs, different experiences, but just knowing and understanding the struggles of it,
The grief. There's grief in all those stories, right?
People can feel a little bit more connected that way. And I can totally see that, you know, regardless of what part of the world you're coming from, if you're struggling to get here as an immigrant, you are able to connect in one way or another. And I think that's a big relief, because there is right now, there is so many families coming in here.
Yes.
Here in Massachusetts, we have a big issue,
Yes.
right? We have people living on the streets.
Yeah.
The
Which you
government,
didn't see that before.
the government
right?
struggling to place families. Moms leaving children behind. So we're gonna need a lot of you. We're gonna need a lot of you, because even if it's 2 days, if it's 3 weeks, if it's 5 months, where all of them have to go through these experiences, right? That they didn't think it was going to happen, or they had another plan, or, maybe things didn't go the way that they were supposed to go. That's trauma that it's being caused to these families, these women, these people. And it's our job, I believe, to make sure that they feel that they are not less, and that they can definitely make it work, regardless of what the situation is right now. But that requires a lot of help, and a lot of mental health.
And priorities.
Yes.
Because sometimes what happened to me in community mental health, Monica, was that, they were like, okay, let's work on, like cognitive distortions, right? I couldn't do that when I was working with someone that did not have a bed guaranteeing the shelter that night. That for that person, the priority wasn't cognitive distortion. The priority, it was a bed and food and where to, So it's also that. What are the priorities? What are your priorities? What are my priorities? And knowing that can change, right? And knowing that sometimes it's okay not to know, and it's okay to ask for help.
Mm-hmm. How do you see? Let me reframe that question. How do you feel the landscape is changing when it comes to maybe low resource to medium income families investing on their mental health?
Yes, I see how we talk about mental health more. It's so interesting. Just yesterday, I started listening to a podcast, and I didn't finish, but they were talking about how after the pandemic, the levels of anxiety and depression are so much higher, right? But I do think that put almost like a magnifying glass on the importance of getting mental health services. Even the idea of, and I know that many people were already doing virtual therapy, but it opened up a possibility for so many of us. Mm-hmm. Even the idea of saying, I don't work until 9, I work, I pick up my daughters at school. So my day seeing clients ends at 2:30. And prior to all of this, it was unthinkable to believe that somebody would carve 45 minutes, 50 minutes in the morning to meet a therapist and in the middle of the day. And now I feel that we have that understanding of, well, I can prioritize this too, right?
Yeah.
I do feel that there's still, unfortunately, the process sometimes it's so complicated. The process of finding a therapist can be so complicated. It almost feels like a part-time job.
Yeah.
And I wish it was easier.
Yeah.
I wish it was easier because, on one hand, you go to these community mental health places, these group practices that take all insurance, but they have a 6-month waiting list or a 5-month waiting list. You don't need to, if you are in the middle of a crisis, or if you want to prevent a crisis, you cannot wait 3, 4, 5 months, right?
Right.
At the same time, I understand that not everybody can pay for therapy out of pocket. Mm-hmm. So I wish the process would be easier, understanding that therapists do need to make a living, and that not every therapist is okay with the idea of working in a community mental health center, or, you know, taking every single insurance, or so it's I feel that a lot of people underestimate the level of burnout that can happen when working in this field and what the job entails.
Yeah. I hear you. I could never do it. So kudos to you. And I mean, you need to have a certain demeanor, certain patience. I have a lot of respect for you and for everyone that is in this profession, because, you guys are exposed to all these stories, all these trauma. You need to help people navigate certain things that they don't even understand where they're coming from, right? And then you have your own problems, your own family, everything that that backpack that you carry as well. And then, how you go to
that
bed.
can turn into a muscle spasm, by the way.
Right? So, how do you sleep? How you keep your brain numb sometimes from thinking all the time how you want to help someone, right? And I think that's, me quito el sombrero, because I don't think I could ever do it,
Pero ¿sabes qué pasa? Aparte de todo este proceso, for me, it's been to understand my own capacity, right? So when I was working in a team, I had access to a psychiatrist. I had access to case managers. I had access to a PCP. I had access to all these resources that I now don't have access to.
Okay.
So I try to be as mindful as possible of that when I choose to work with someone, because I feel that it's not fair for the other person and for myself to say yes to a very complicated case that I feel I don't have the capacity to work on right now. So that has been part of the learning process too, right? And some people absolutely love to do intense trauma work. I feel that that's not me now, but trauma is always there.
Yeah.
On one, in different, sometimes extremely well disguised, but it's always there.
We're, I like to think like we Latinos are pretty good actors.
Oh, yes. Y muy dramáticos a
Sí,
veces.
dramático y de todo. So, Dulce, for those Latinas right now that are watching, what would you say will be the best investment that they can do when it comes to their mental health?
There's something that I feel comes before the investment. Well, aquí está el huevo o el pollito. ¿Quién vino primero?
La gallina, el huevo, dilo.
It seems to me that in order for them to be ready to make that investment, they need to ask for help. Which for so many of us is so hard.
It's very difficult, yeah.
So difficult because we're so good at what we do. So at what point do you ask for help, right?
Yeah.
Do you ask for help? Like, when do you do it? And then you keep like waiting for things to get worse. And it's also like this mentality of looking for help only when you cannot take it anymore, instead of looking for help to prevent things from worsening.
Yeah.
But I feel that asking for help, which, in part involves self-compassion, is critical in order for us to make that investment. And sometimes making the investment, it can be what helps you to finally ask for help.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that many times it's the opposite. You need to make that first step or that decision on your own in order to see what is it that you need, right?
Yeah. Sometimes also surrounding yourself with people that have done it or that it's doing it, and that you can see the difference or you can see a change, makes that decision a lot easier. And I'll tell you, at VRC, we started like a testing program, right? It started with like the executive team, and then it triggered down to like our team. We opened it up to our team. Now, most of our team is Portuguese speaking, so they feel more comfortable speaking, Portuguese with someone from where they're from, right? Like, so if I'm from Minas Gerais, I feel more comfortable speaking with someone that is from there because there is some jargon, some type of, different cultural things that are different from probably someone that comes from Sao Paulo, right? So interestingly enough, we started, we had 2 therapists. We opened it up for the team. And they were interviewed by the therapist, and they'll be like, oh, I connected more with this person, or I connected more with this person. And then they will start their journey with that specific therapist. And, we selected a few people that were, good performers on the team, but they weren't hitting the level that we knew that they were capable of hitting. And after a couple weeks, not months, but just couple weeks of easy coaching, therapy, their productivity went from here to like here.
That's amazing, yes.
Which, it told us that, maybe if we make this available to everyone on the company as a perk, but not forcing it. Yeah. They have to want it.
Yeah.
Right? Our performance will improve as a whole. And, this past year was one of the most difficult years that the insurance industry has experienced ever. A lot of people had to shut doors. A lot of people had to sell their businesses. I will safely say that a lot, like over 70% of businesses didn't grow; they shrank. And still today we are going through a big transition in our industry. But in our company, our world, we didn't, even though we experienced challenges, we focused on culture, people, mental health. And instead of doing all those things that the rest of the world were doing, we were going up. And it was a simple change where we put people first.
Yeah.
And when we put people first, they put us first.
Well, they probably feel seen and valued and respected.
And not only that, they had time to take care of them. Because a lot of us live on automation. A lot of us just, I need to pay the bills. I need to provide for myself. And you run yourself through the ground mode, Yeah. So it does make a difference.
Absolutely.
Like, regardless of who you identify with, regardless if it's Dulce or any other person, Latin, American, Brazilian, Russian, it really doesn't matter. As far as you identify and you're able to work with that person, it can make a huge difference in your life, in your career, in your performance on a day-to-day. And, everything started months ago. We remember you did something for our team.
Yeah.
And we started bringing more and more professionals on a weekly basis. And we started understanding that it doesn't matter how much content, how many tools, how many of anything business-wise we give them. If we don't take care of them as people, performance was going to continue to be the same.
I love that, Monica, and the fact that you did it, because what I've seen now working with companies and corporations and organizations, it's that sometimes it looks beautiful on a website,
Yeah.
but
It's very difficult to implement.
yes, yes. And it's so interesting that once I have the opportunity to work with them, I'm surprised by all the topics that come up, which on one hand, it makes me feel so good about the work we're doing because I feel comfortable enough to talk about all these different extremely complex issues. But then at the same time, I realized not the only reason, but one of the main reasons why they're talking about this is because they don't have any other place probably that they feel comfortable enough talking about this.
Yeah.
Which, it should not be that way.
Yeah. I'll tell you, it brings its challenges, especially if you have a global team. Because cultures are very different, right? Like I am Puerto Rican, and 70% or more of my team is from another country, right? That and how do we integrate that? We have people from Mexico, we have people from Argentina, we have people from Brazil, we have Dominicans, we have Puerto Ricans, we're all Latinos, but our cultures are very different. So how are we going to integrate all of that?
Yeah.
How are we going to make them, perform together? How are we going to help them break down those barriers that they're putting themselves just because they didn't know anything better?
Psychological safety.
Exactly.
How can you bring that to the table with so many different variables, right?
How can they feel valuable, like themselves, without me having to say every day, you did great? Because at the end of the day, sometimes you're not going to be there as owner of the company. So how are they going to self-motivate? How are they going to be sure about, oh no, I am doing my best. I'm going to help this other person to do their best too. This is working for me. How I'm going to share that, right? Like creating that culture where it is about togetherness.
Yeah.
And upbringing is healthy competition, because now they feel like comfortable sharing their performance, their numbers, and I'm going to beat you. And it's not taking as a bad cognition. It's actually, I'm going to be better than you this month. And then let's see what happens the next month. So they're bringing the better version of themselves every single day. And I think, it is exciting. It is exciting to see that. And we're only giving them 45 minutes on a weekly basis to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, time is money, but health will make you more.
Absolutely.
And I think, for us, realizing that was a huge aha moment. And people like yourself and others have had a lot to do with the realization of that, with, taking your time, coming to the team, talking to them. That means a lot. That means a lot. And I think, from my perspective, if anyone out there, Latina entrepreneur, Latina CEO, has a team or themselves, do it.
Yeah.
Do it, because it's worth every penny. It's worth everything. And it doesn't mean that everybody's gonna agree on everything all the time, but you're creating a healthier environment to have difficult discussions. And I think that's the most important thing.
Well, it's that trust.
Yeah.
It's building and holding that space, right? Which sometimes starts out by creating that space where you feel that you can trust the people around you, where you feel comfortable saying what's going on. I always, and I understand where it comes from, but I struggle so much with the term work-life balance.
Yes.
There's no such because it's like, okay, that means that, life is not part of your work and work is not part of your life. Like, how should we, and I do these cafecitos, monthly cafecitos, right, with companies. And it's so valuable for people to be able to say, I just came back from maternity leave and I find it so difficult to talk to human resources and to have someone crying, in front of others.
Yeah.
And like to be able to create that space, right, where other people are holding this, are creating this trust, and be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Monica, because
It's a big problem.
it is. Yeah. It is. And many of us were taught, almost trained, I want to say, to present yourself perfectly, especially with your boss, with your team, with your coworkers.
No weakness.
No weaknesses.
It's a struggle, but I think slowly we're getting there, and slowly we're educating ourselves in order to avoid those mistakes and provide safe spaces for everybody. I think, respect also plays a big role.
Absolutely.
And like you said, at the bottom of performance, numbers, results, and everything, at the bottom of that pyramid, that base is all about trust.
Yes.
And I know it's difficult maybe to achieve that when you have bigger corporations and at a massive level. But if you starting small now and you take care of that now, it will just be easy down the road. And it's never too late, I guess, is the message here, right?
Yeah.
It's never too late to start. And, I think everybody deserves to give themselves the opportunity to go through the process.
And modeling, Monica, I am a witness of what a beautiful model you are. You're a role model for that, right? So it's just not just talking the talk, but walking the walk too, because that inspires. I am inspired by you, and you're not my boss. I cannot believe how inspirational it is. Of course, when you see someone not just saying those
I
stuff
wasn't
by
expecting
doing
that.
it, actually doing it. I feel that it's, I did not have that. And I feel that's priceless.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, everybody, there you have it. Dulce put me in the spot. I was not expecting that. But thank you, Dulce, so much. I think your story is extremely inspiring. Thank you for all you do on a day-to-day basis. You always show up for everyone, and I love that about you.
Sometimes I need, that's a work in progress too. And that's the other thing, Monica. We don't need to show up for everyone, right?
But you do.
If you don't have it in you. Pero muscle spasm.
So thank you, everyone, for watching. Thank you for being here. I hope you enjoyed Dulce's story. And for those Latinas, immigrant women, if you're looking for help, if you feel that, you are in need, or even if you don't, maybe you are not aware, reach out and we'll be more than happy to help you. We'll see you next time.